Hi, I'm Colton DeBiase, and joining me right now is Congressman Mike Doyle from the 18th Congressional District in the state of Pennsylvania. Congressman Doyle, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to be with us.
Happy to do it.
Alrighty, Congressman Doyle. I do want to get to you about policy in a minute. Yeah, but first, I want to get like a better understanding for our viewers about your position as the chair of the subcommittee of communications and technology in the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. So, what is your position as the chair of the subcommittee?
Well, as chairman of communications and technology, my subcommittee has jurisdiction on all those issues, things like net neutrality, a lot of what you're seeing on these platforms with regards to privacy and disinformation, that flows through our committee. We have jurisdiction over the Federal Communications Commission. So from time to time, we have the FCC commissioners in front of our committee to speak with them and ask them questions on policies they're carrying out. We are dealing with spectrum auctions right now. As you know, 5G is the big thing. We want to make sure we're keeping up with the rest of the world on 5G deployment. And to do that, we need a lot of mid-band spectrum. And so that needs to be auctioned off for that. And then the other thing is one of the things we want to do is a huge broadband deployment bill to make sure that we're getting broadband to rural America and underserved areas in America. This pandemic has really made it clear that there are two kinds of Americas. The Americas where kids can distance learn because they have access to the internet and equipment, and those that can't. And we're seeing this with healthcare too. So accessibility is important, but affordability is important too. And in this bill, we're looking at about a $100 billion bill that we're hoping to introduce in the beginning of the next session of Congress that will deal with both accessibility and affordability. So those are some of the things my committee does.
Oh, all right. And then something else that I wanted to get to as you mentioned. So with the recent confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court a few days ago, and also not to mention, you are also a strong supporter of the Affordable Care Act. So do you believe that with the confirmation of Ms. Barrett to the Supreme Court, do you believe that the ACA is in danger of being overruled? And if that is the case, how will you assure folks in the district that they will have affordable health insurance?
Well, it's certainly a concern that we have. Right now, as we speak, that case is before the Supreme Court, and they're going to be hearing that case shortly. And now Judge Barrett will be sitting on that court with a 6-3 majority. That bill, when we passed it, my committee helped write that bill. I'm very proud of it. We brought insurance to 20 million Americans who didn't have insurance. But more importantly, we ended the practice of insurance companies discriminating against sick people. A lot of insurance companies will say, well, we'll cover you for everything except that one thing that makes you sick, a pre-existing condition. We made it possible that insurance companies couldn't factor that in. More importantly, too, the caps in insurance. All these policies used to have annual caps and lifetime caps on how much they would pay. And a good example would be if you had a child with cancer and you had to buy very expensive treatments for the cancer treatments. Once you hit that annual cap, the insurance companies didn't pay anymore. So you'd see these families that had insurance holding like fundraisers, fish fries, to raise money so that they could continue their children's cancer treatments. We put an end to all of that. We knew when we wrote the bill it was going to need some work, that a lot of things would happen with the bill that maybe were unforeseen, and that we could make changes along the way. Unfortunately, the Republicans never wanted to work with us to help improve the bill. They just wanted to repeal the bill. And the problem is they never had a replacement for the bill. And to this day, President Trump talks about this wonderful health insurance plan of his that's going to lower everyone's premium and cover everything, except we've never seen the plan because they don't have one. So if the Supreme Court tries to strike down the Affordable Care Act, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, and we're going to have to go quickly and make sure that we cover people, and that's going to be very important. So we're going to wait and see what happens. My hope is that they don't strike down the bill, but we'll see what happens.
So why do you think Republicans have been, because ever since this was signed into law by President Obama, Republicans have been very, very critical of the bill. Why do you think Republicans have been very critical of this bill ever since it was signed into law? Excuse me.
Well, that's a good question. I think part of it was just because it was President Obama's bill. We tried to work with the Republicans. I sat on the committee that wrote the bill. We made concession after concession to Republicans trying to write a bipartisan bill that everybody could get behind. We didn't think healthcare should have been a partisan issue. That the fact that there were so many millions of Americans that didn't have insurance in the richest country in the world just struck us as crazy. And that the insurance industries, in order to increase their profits, these are for-profit companies for the most part, we're using exclusionary tactics basically to say, we only want to insure healthy people. Those are the people we'll give good premiums to. But if you're sick or you have a chronic condition, we don't want you in our risk pool. So they look for ways to exclude sick people. We just thought that wasn't right. And so part of the real thrust behind the Affordable Care Act was to end that practice. Now, I don't want to suggest that, Republicans favor insurance companies, but insurance companies have a big lobby in Washington, D.C., and they predominantly favor the Republican Party because they like those policies that enable them to keep unhealthy people out of their risk pool because that maximizes their profits. So I don't know why they wouldn't work with us. And the other thing, I always said, if the Republicans had a better bill, put it on the floor and let's vote on it. And this was during a period of time when they controlled the House of Representatives. They could have put a health care bill on the floor anytime they wanted. But the one time they tried to put something together, they couldn't even get their own members to vote for it, and the public rejected it. So I just think it's a little hypocritical for Republicans to say that, the ACA is a horrible bill and that it's a disaster, and they've never, ever offered an alternative to the ACA because here's what they know. When you have to cover everyone, regardless of their health, it does get more expensive. And that's why we had the factor where everyone had to participate. Almost like car insurance. You're not allowed to drive a car in Pennsylvania, or I don't believe any other state, without car insurance. And how does car insurance work? Good drivers end up paying for bad drivers sometimes, right? We all pay premiums. Some of us never have an accident. But when that one person has a serious accident, there's money in that risk pool to pay for that person. Well, the same concept behind the ACA, that healthy people were going to pay premiums, and that they wouldn't utilize the healthcare system as much because they don't have a chronic condition or something terrible doesn't happen to them. But it makes sure there's enough money to take care of people that do. I would much rather pay premiums and never have to use the healthcare than have cancer or have something that causes me to be a chronic user of healthcare. And that's all we were trying to do. And we knew we'd have to tweak it along the way. Unfortunately, we couldn't find partners in the Republican Party. And here we are today in the middle of a pandemic, and the President of the United States is trying to kill a healthcare bill that would leave 20 million people without insurance in the middle of a pandemic. I just think it's absolutely incredible.
But what would you have to say to people who are critical of the bill because their premiums are too high?
Well, that's one of the things we wanted to be able to work on. In the House bill, we had a public option too that would give people a way to opt into a public program that would be a little bit cheaper and would force some competition with some of the private insurance companies. Unfortunately, we passed the public option in the House version of the ACA, but it was taken out in the Senate version, and the final product didn't have a public option. one of the things that Vice President Biden wants to do, if he's elected president, is to improve the ACA and to add a public option, which will give a little competition to the private sector and help, we think, reduce healthcare costs. So it's something we want to work on. We want the insurance to be affordable for everyone, but we want to make sure that everyone gets covered and that there's no condition that you have that an insurance company can say, we're not going to cover that because it costs too much money. That's just not right. That's just not who we are as Americans. Everybody has a right to health care insurance, and no private insurance company in search of profits should be able to say we don't want to cover sick people.
Now, you have been very critical in your time in Congress with UPMC. Do you believe that they are one of those private insurance company that only focuses on for-profit?
Well, I have publicly stated my feelings about some of UPMC's practices. First, let me say they are a great healthcare system, a great academic medical center. They are the largest employer in the state of Pennsylvania, and the people who work there do amazing work. I would never hesitate if I had a healthcare need to go into UPMC because I know some of the best people in the world work there. But UPMC is a non-profit corporation. And as such, they have a charter that mandates that, they have to understand that as a nonprofit, that they have a responsibility to the community too, because part of that nonprofit status enables them not to pay taxes to the local governments and others. So while UPMC has done some payments in lieu of taxes and they do have some programs, I think my criticism has been twofold. When you try to run a nonprofit like a for-profit business, and this tension that developed between UPMC and Highmark when Highmark acquired a hospital system, put patients in the middle. When UPMC said, we're not going to put you in our preferred tier if you have Highmark insurance, and people had for years been doctoring with UPMC doctors, that's just not the right thing to do. I mean, that's a decision that hurt people. And as a nonprofit institution, they should have found a way to reach an agreement. It shouldn't have taken the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and others to constantly put pressure on this organization to reach some sort of an agreement that didn't impact patients and people who happen to have Highmark insurance but wanted to go to UPMC hospitals. The other thing that I've been critical of is how they've treated their workers. They have constantly resisted workers' rights to organize. There are still many, many people working for the system, and these are some of the jobs that are the toughest jobs. They're not doctors or radiologists. I mean, they're working there, and they're barely making a living. They're $11, $12, $13 an hour in an institution that has record profits and could easily pay a living wage to these workers and give them some basic rights. UPMC employees pay for their own health care insurance at UPMC. I mean, there's just so much more they could be doing that would fill their charitable mission too, as being a nonprofit. So I've been critical of the way the top management of UPMC has done certain things, but I don't in any way want to criticize the hospital itself. The people who work there are good people, and the healthcare there is the best. And Pittsburghers should be really, really fortunate to have an academic medical center like UPMC, along with the Allegheny General Network too. I mean, to have two great networks in Pittsburgh is a bonus, and two insurance companies. Now you've got UPMC insurance competing with Highmark, and then we have also other private insurances, Aetna and United and others. Competition is good for consumers, and when you have insurance companies competing for consumers, that drives prices down. So, that's always been my focus. How does it affect the people who live in Pittsburgh? The people that just get up every day and work hard and do the right thing, and then have to encounter a healthcare system that somehow excludes them because they're having a battle of two nonprofits, by the way. Highmark is a nonprofit too, so let's not completely throw them out of the picture too. I've been critical there too. I just think nonprofits should act like nonprofits, and sometimes they haven't done that.
Okay, so for the record, so like you mean that like you are referring to with your criticism to like to top UPMC executives such as UPMC CEO Jeffrey Romoff, who you on the record have called a shark. So like, is this what you meant your criticism to go to, rather than those excuse me, to the grade workers of a UPMC?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, it's not personal. I don't dislike Jeffrey Romoff. I want to make that clear. I am critical of some of the decisions coming out of his office. He's the boss there. There is no question about that. And he has the ability to change certain policies at UPMC. And you know, for the longest time, resisted doing something to solve this impasse that took place between UPMC and Highmark. And like I said, both actors have culpability here. Okay, I want to be clear about that. But I wanted to distinguish, you know, decisions made at the very top that affect folks that I represent, you know, versus the healthcare system itself. It's a good healthcare system, and we're proud of that, and we're proud of the people that work there.
Okay. So I do want to switch to COVID since we are kind of on the topic of health insurance. So why do you think another potential COVID-19 relief bill has not been passed through Congress yet? And how will you make sure that the people in the district have what they need to make sure that like businesses could stay alive and so like, and people feeling safe whenever they need to go to a grocery store? These are kind of like examples because the virus is pretty much posing another threat to our country right now.
Yeah, I mean, we see the virus spiking as we speak. And the White House, just as recently as a day or two ago, Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff to the President, waving the white flag, basically saying, we can't control the virus. And so you just got to hope if you get it, that you have a team of 13 doctors like the President had and access to the latest therapies if you go to the hospital. That's just a terrible thing to say. From day one, this president knew back in January the serious nature of this disease. He even said on the record publicly to Bob Woodward that this is very deadly, much more deadly than the flu. So he knew this going in. He chose not to tell us what we were facing. And he also chose not to set an example for the American people about what they should be doing to help contain the virus. In fact, he made fun of people who wore masks. He called Dr. Fauci a disaster and the rest of the scientists that are working on COVID-19 idiots. And so here we are with over 220-some thousand Americans dead, cases spiking dramatically through the Midwest and Western states. This morning on the news, I was watching Utah say that they are just about out of critical care beds, and they're going to have to start making rationing decisions of who they treat and who they don't treat. And we need to, and then we have small businesses that are shuttering up here in Pittsburgh, especially mom and pop restaurants, people in the hospitality industry, the entertainment industry, the airline industry. We passed a COVID bill, and we addressed some of those problems. A stimulus check to people who were unemployed because of the pandemic, money for state and local governments because their revenues are done as a result of the pandemic, and their expenses have gone up because of pandemic-related situations. They need money, or they're going to have to start laying off firemen and EMTs and police officers. Small businesses need more programs like PPP that's going to give loans or grants to small businesses, and they still need more relief. And we know that their situation hasn't gotten better, it's actually gotten worse. So we tried to pass the HEROES Act, and we did in the House 6 months ago. and we sent it to the U.S. Senate. And the U.S. Senate says, we're not going to take it up. Mitch McConnell has an obsession with appointing as many federal judges for life to the bench as he can, conservative judges. And that's basically all the Senate's been doing. Then he said, well, it's too expensive. So we sent a second bill up there. First bill was $3.4 trillion. Our second bill, $2.2 trillion. And we said, okay, we're willing to compromise. We'll bring ours down $1.2 trillion. Mitch still wouldn't take it up. Then the White House decided they were going to negotiate with us. Steve Mnuchin calls the speaker. We were negotiating. Then all of a sudden the president said, call off the negotiations, and abruptly just stopped them. Then he said, a couple days later, let's negotiate again. I mean, it's like craziness trying to negotiate with this administration, because depending on how the president wakes up that morning or what he tweets the nights before, completely changes the dynamics of how we negotiate. Well, the bottom line is, and we're learning as recently as today or yesterday, that Mitch was telling the president, don't negotiate a deal with the Democrats because it's going to interfere with our ability to get Amy Coney Barrett voted on to the Supreme Court, and that he felt that was more important than anything else they would do. So basically what Mitch was saying is, the heck with the American people. I don't care that small businesses are shuttering. I don't care that our frontline workers don't have the equipment that they need. I don't care that people aren't getting stimulus checks or unemployment compensation. All I care about is making sure that we make the Supreme Court a 6-3 Supreme Court for generations to come. And that superseded anything with regards to negotiating on COVID. So here we are now, 6 days before the election, with no chance to pass a bill by election day, because there just isn't time to do it now. And it's going to have to wait for either the lame duck session or the beginning of the new Congress. Now, Democrats and Speaker Pelosi have made it very clear that when we do a package, we're making the package retroactive to make people whole and to make these small businesses whole. But I don't know how much longer that they can hold on. The Trump administration seems to be saying, just open up. Just go back to things like they're normal. We can't contain this virus, but we're working on these treatments and eventually a vaccine that should help you survive it. I mean, that seems to be the strategy. Well, I got news for you. That's a strategy for hundreds of thousands of more people to die between now and when there's a widely distributed vaccine, which most medical experts tell us isn't going to really be probably till the second quarter of 2021, where there's widespread distribution. And I think that's, fingers crossed that we're at that point in the second quarter. So I just think it's shameful, the behavior we've seen from Senate Republicans and Mitch McConnell in particular during this time.
So since you did mention Amy Coney Barrett again, I did want to ask you something else about that. So, like, in the event, so if Democrats had control of the Senate, and if there was a Supreme Court opening, I guess, for example, we can go back to President Obama's opening with Merrick Garland.
Right.
Do you feel Democrats would have done the same thing with trying to push this through, even though it was an election year?
Well, I think the Senate Republicans have set a new standard now, and I think this is going to haunt them sometime in the future. But it's clear that when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland 9 months, by the way, before the election, no less than Lindsey Graham, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, basically said, we can't do that this close to an election. And, his words are pretty clear. He said, you can hold me to this. If in 2020, we have a Republican president and there's a vacancy on the court, we should wait till after the election, and you can use my words against me. I'm almost quoting him. I don't have the exact, but it's on camera. And all of a sudden, what people say doesn't have meaning anymore. Lindsey said, well, the way Democrats treated Kavanaugh changed all that for me. That wasn't the point. The point is that we confirmed the Supreme Court justice a week before one of the most hotly contested presidential elections in our history. It seems to me the right thing to do, and that would set a precedent for all future nominations, would be to wait till after the election And whoever, if President Trump gets reelected, he has every right to nominate her. She, from a qualification standpoint, is a qualified jurist. Nobody's disputing that. It's her ideology and what it means to a court right now that is 5-4 with some swing votes there. Sometimes it's not always 5-4 one way, which I think is a healthy situation to a situation where this could be slanted, to the right for a generation. Justice Barrett is 48 years old. We talk about term limits for should Supreme Court judges be able to serve into their 80s and 90s? I think that's a question that really should be examined also. If people wanted to really be, political about this, they would have had, Justice Ginsburg try to retire before people knew she was sick. But we didn't do that, and President Obama wouldn't do that. But I do think that the idea that we have people on our Supreme Court that can serve for life, which means they can serve until they die, I think we're going to be taking a look at things like that, as opposed to do we add more people to the courts or things. But it's largely going to be a Senate function, not a House function, because they have the advice and consent. But there's no way to justify what they did. And to answer your question, if the shoe were on the other foot now, after what has just been done, I don't expect the Republicans should think that they're going to be treated any differently in the future now that they've set this, what I believe is a very dangerous precedent in this appointment. So we'll see. I do think that Justice Barrett should recuse herself from any election night challenges. That there are going to be challenges when these votes are counted. You just know it's going to happen. And for her to make any decisions on this election when she was appointed by the president whose party will be filing these objections, 7 days before an election. When the president has said we need to get her on the bench, we need to have this extra vote on the bench for challenges. He's come right out and said it. She hasn't said it, but he said it. That he basically thinks that, he's putting someone on the bench that will side with him if they have challenges. She definitely should recuse herself. And if she doesn't, I think it's going to be very damaging for the country. We're a divided country as it is right now. And boy, I tell you, if this is another Bush versus Gore kind of decision coming up, I don't think the Supreme Court should decide who the president is. I think the people should, and any valid vote that's cast before Election Day should be counted. The idea that we have states and parties going to court trying to disenfranchise legally cast ballots that were cast before November 3rd because they somehow arrive late because of the post office is outrageous. Every legitimate vote should be counted, and that's the only way the American people are going to have confidence in the outcome.
Yeah, now, the state of our country is something I would like to get to later, but I kind of want to go back with I'm talking about the Supreme Court once again. So, but do you think it would be unethical for the Democrats to maybe have some sort of revenge if anything like this situation with Amy Coney Barrett would happen in the future and things would be on the other side of the aisle?
Well, I don't look at it as revenge. I think, precedents get set on how things are done, right? And while many of these aren't written in statute, they've been done because there's been a general agreement that there's certain things you do and don't do as it comes. I think it'd be pretty hypocritical for Republicans to say, well, I know we did this to you guys, but, I sure hope you don't do it to us. It's not so much that it's a revenge, it's that they've set a precedent as this is now how the Senate acts, that apparently appointing someone close to a presidential election is not a problem anymore. It's not taboo. It's not something that we've just over history never have done that way. So I think it's more like you set precedents, right, than it is that it's a revenge factor. I mean, some presidents serve and never get to appoint a Supreme Court justice. There's just no vacancies during their terms. And then here's a president, a sitting president, who's only been in office, 3.5 or so more years, and he's gotten to appoint 3. A lot of it is just the timing of this, the situation, and then precedents get set. And Merrick Garland set a precedent. The Republicans said, no, we're not appointing judges this close to a presidential election. We're just not going to do that. And they had to withdraw his nomination. He couldn't get a vote in the Senate. That was a precedent that was set. And so here we are, 4 years later, and all of a sudden that precedent gets thrown out the window. So now a new precedent has been set, right? And so that's the way I look at it. It's not a revenge thing. It's sort of what the rules used to be aren't the rules anymore. Mitch has set a new set of rules. So, when you set the rules, you have to live by them.
Okay, now I do want to maybe switch gears to term limits, because this was something that was brought up in your debate with your opponent, Mr. Luke Negron, who has been very adamant in his campaign, about term limits. So, as somebody who has been in Congress for 25 years, would you support term limits in the Senate and the Congress? Because this was a survey conducted in 2018 by a Republican law firm called McLaughlin, and Associates. They found that 82% of Americans were in favor of a constitutional amendment that will place term limits in members of Congress, and this is according to the website The Hill. Would this be something you would support?
No, there is a term limit. I mean, this is the confusing thing, that a member of Congress's term is 2 years. That's your term. You're never guaranteed more than a 2-year term. It's not up to me whether I get to serve more than 1 term or 2 terms. It's up to the 700,000 people in Western Pennsylvania that I represent. So every 2 years, I have to reapply for my job. I don't really know too many professions where you have to reapply for your job every 2 years, but mine's one of them. And then the people I represent have to make a decision. Is Mike Doyle someone we want to send back to Washington, D.C. to represent us, or we think maybe it's time for somebody different to do it because we're really not pleased with the way he's representing us. His votes don't reflect our beliefs or our concerns. He's not been active enough in the district. He's not really helped Pittsburgh move forward. We need somebody that's going to be a little bit more dynamic or whatever reason. And every 2 years, that process takes place, not only in a general election, but in a primary election too. So voters in the Democratic Party might say, Mike Doyle's not the kind of Democrat that we want representing us in Congress. We want somebody a little more liberal. We want somebody a little more moderate, or we want somebody that's going to be for this issue or that issue. And so I have had primary opponents in my last 4 or 5 elections, my last 5. And then I have general election opponents too. So every 2 years, there's 2 opportunities to say, we want somebody different. And it's not my choice. It's the choice of people in Western Pennsylvania who go to the polls and express their desire to see me continue to serve them or to pick somebody else. I think that's a pretty fair process. And I think it works well. So I don't know what some Republican law firm survey says. I'm sure, this is an issue popular with Republicans, and they've tried to make it an election issue. I don't think it carries much sway with voters because voters have the opportunity to vote for who they want. So I have a term limit. It's 2 years. Come November 3rd, my term could be up. People in Pittsburgh could say, you know what? you've been there too long. You're not really representing us the way we want to be represented. And we want a new voice in there. And they can go to the ballot box and they can do that. So I think that system works well.
Yes, yes, yeah. But what would you have to say to maybe people who maybe criticize there not being term limits because it just seems like career politicians can just keep their power and they might not truly care about the people they serve because they know they've been in there for so long? What would you say to those people?
Well, I'd say that they're not really looking at the turnover in the Congress. When you look at the makeup of the United States Congress, people that have been there 3 terms or less are the majority now. So there's a lot of turnover taking place in the United States Congress every 2 years. You'll see a lot of it this election too. You're going to see a lot of incumbents get beat, and you're going to see a lot of new faces. We saw it in the 2018 cycle. We had 61 new members come into the Democratic caucus. So there's that's like, you know, there's a constant turnover in the Congress, and that's a healthy thing too, because you need 3 things. You need people with the institutional memory of Congress. Otherwise, staffs run the government, not elected officials. So you need people that understand how these committee structures work and how the system works. And then you need new ideas coming in every 2 years. And I think we're seeing that in our Congress. There's lots of turnover taking place. As far as this career politician thing, I think it's funny. People run and they say, I'm not a politician. I'll never forget, there was a person on my committee started a speech that way. And I said, well, guess what, buddy? You're a politician now. You know, you might be able to have that little mantra when you were first running for office, but you're an elected official now. So you're one of us. It's the only profession I know where experience is somehow looked down on too. I mean, if we have someone that's been a cardiologist for 20 years and is really good at what he does as a cardiologist, that's the person we want to go to. Somehow, if you're a member of Congress who sits on a key committee like I do, or on a Ways and Means committee, and you've become an expert in tax policy or in telecommunications policy or energy policy, somehow that isn't valued by some people. So I just think voters ultimately have the final say-so. And all this talk of career politicians or political power, I'm the son of a steel worker. I grew up in a blue-collar family in Swissvale, okay? I've been married 45 years to my wife, who also grew up in Swissvale, and we raised 4 kids. And I've lived in this district my entire life. The idea that I'm some, you know, political power person, or I come from some power family is kind of funny to me. It's talk. And I just think people judge you on your actions, not what you say, but what you do. And every 2 years, 700,000 people in this great part of the world that I love and have lived in all my life can tell me to go home anytime they want. And they do it frequently all over America. And I feel privileged that the people in Pittsburgh have chosen to send me back as many times as they did. And I continue to work very hard on their behalf. And I think they see that work ethic, and they know how much I care about them and this region. And I think that's one of the reasons on election day, I feel comfortable about what the result's going to be. But you never know till the votes are counted.
Yeah, that's right. But I want to maybe go back to term limits, as you mentioned, in the Supreme Court, because there was a bill proposed last month for justices for their term limits to only be for 18 years. Will you join your Democratic colleagues to, I guess, join like in support of the bill?
I don't want to set a term limit on Supreme Court justices, but I do think that at a certain age, I mean, I know it sounds like, you know, well, now that's age discrimination if you say, well, if someone's over 80 years old, they shouldn't serve on the bench. I mean, we do have judges that after a certain age go into what's called senior status, and they're still called on to fill in on cases and that. I don't know, you know, the idea of lifetime appointments to the federal bench, I think, is important because it shields them from politics, right? Once they're appointed for life, nobody can threaten them, right? Nobody can, and I think that's healthy, and I think that's a good process. I just think sometimes when people become incapacitated, uh, you know, I don't, I have to admit to you, I don't know what a good answer to that is. I'm not sure that term limits for Supreme Court justices is the answer either. Uh, I think we need an independent judiciary. I really think that's important. I don't think any president should be able to threaten any judge. If we're gonna, if the institutions of our democracy are gonna survive, we need three independent branches of government, and the judiciary is part of that. So I'm one that would have to think long and hard about making any drastic changes to how it's currently set up.
Yeah, and so for the record, actually, Vice President Biden has actually come out against term limits on the Supreme Court. This is
Yeah.
according to the Hill as well. But I kind of want to go back to what you said about age. Couldn't the same be said for folks in Congress and in the Senate?
Yeah, but see, in the Senate and in the House, you can vote them out. You can't vote out a Supreme Court justice. That's a lifetime appointment. So it's really apples and oranges. It's not like members of Congress and members of the Senate have lifetime appointments. We don't. For us, it's every 2 years, and you could be said, here's the door. And for the Senate, it's 6 years. And I think that's all factored in when people vote. If someone's running for office, and people have many different factors they use of whether or not they're going to vote for you or not. But I don't think you can compare that to the judiciary because it's two different things: a lifetime appointment versus a 2-year appointment or a 6-year appointment.
Okay, and so I do want to get to something that your opponent Luke Negron has criticized you for this. So Mr. Negron claims in a campaign video that you have not authorized or passed a single bill during your time in Congress. Are these claims true? And I want to hear your response to that.
Well, first of all, they're absolutely not true. He obviously doesn't know my record, and he doesn't understand, by the way, how the House of Representatives work. Just this session of Congress, I passed the net neutrality bill out of the House of Representatives. Now, if Luke is saying the Senate didn't pass it and it didn't become law, he could talk about that. My robocall bill passed the House and the Senate and was signed by the president. So that's in law. I'm the founder co-founder and co-chair of the Autism Caucus. I have passed several autism reauthorization bills which have passed the House and Senate and have been signed by the president. The other thing that he is not knowledgeable about is how the process works. A lot of times pieces of legislation that you introduce get folded into larger bills that become law. And so it doesn't go down as, you didn't pass the bill. The bigger bill that was the vehicle for passing the bill is that. You'll see that a lot when we do what's called an omnibus bill, where we take several bills and put them together and pass them, and then certain provisions of our bill get put in there. So, if he had a better understanding about how Congress worked, he would know how silly of a statement that is. There's been multiple pieces of legislation that I have been either the prime sponsor or co-sponsor of that have become law over the years. Many of them folded into larger bills, so it wouldn't be that obvious, but they have signing ceremonies. And, if Luke someday wants to come and visit me in Washington, D.C., up on the wall are several certificates from signing ceremonies where presidents signed my bills into law. So it's just not an accurate statement.
Do those pictures that you mentioned include President Trump as well, or maybe even President Bush?
Yeah, both. President Trump signed my robocall bill into law, and so that's one. And I'm sure during the Bush administration we did an autism reauthorization bill, which he no doubt would sign. Look, I'm agnostic when it comes to, if it's a good piece of legislation, I don't care if it's a Republican bill or a Democratic bill, and I don't care if the president's a Republican or a Democrat. I want them to sign the bill, and I want it to become law. So I don't not introduce bills when there's a Republican president. You want to get stuff done, right? And that's the important thing. And so there was I can't think of the name of the group, but there was a group that looked at how bipartisan you were in terms of, when you did legislation, did you try to get a Republican co-sponsor, or did you co-sponsor a Republican bill? And out of 435 people, I was ranked like the 35th most bipartisan member in the Congress. So, a lot of people say, well, Mike Doyle's a real partisan. It's not true. On my committee, especially the Energy and Commerce Committee, we have a long tradition of working bipartisanly. And just about every bill that I've introduced or passed out of my subcommittee have been bipartisan bills that were voted on by voice vote because we got agreement with the Republicans, we worked with them, and we got those bills out of committee. So, my nature is to work with the Republicans on anything we can, because ultimately that gives you a better chance of getting the bill through the Senate, especially if it's a Republican Senate and a Democratic House, and getting a president to sign it. So we're always trying to do things in a bipartisan way. The ranking member of my committee, Bob Latta from Ohio, is a good friend. We work well together. The ranking member of the full committee and I are good friends. We work together. And many of the members on my committee, the Republican members on my committee, I think would tell you that I'm a chairman that's been very fair to them, to make sure that their voices are heard, to give them a vote when they want to vote. I believe that's the best way to do it. We work for everybody after the election's over. So, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. We want to work with you if we can get things done that benefit my congressional district in the country.
And for the record, does that include President Clinton and President Obama as well, compared with President Trump and President Bush, as we mentioned with signing your bills?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I've had the pleasure of working with 4 administrations, and some I like better than others. But it doesn't stop the work. I mean, I'm a legislator, right? So, and I'm on a very select committee, and I now chair a very important subcommittee. My responsibility is to make sure that we're addressing those issues that are important to the country, and help move us forward, and to try to do so in a bipartisan way, because that's the best way to get a bill passed in divided government. And we've been in divided government, and we need to work together. So I have no problem working with the Republican Party, and I have no problem working with President Trump if we're working on something we both agree on. Now, if I don't agree with them, that's a different matter. But there's lots that, COVID relief shouldn't be partisan. An infrastructure bill shouldn't be partisan. These are all things we can be doing that there's no Republican bridges and Democratic roads. It's the infrastructure of our country. So there's a lot of issues where we work in a bipartisan way, and I think that's a good thing.
That actually did lead into my next question. So, as someone who has been in Washington for over 25 years, have you ever seen Washington this divided before? And also, do you think that Washington is truly divided? And what will you and your Democratic and Republican colleagues do to ensure the American people, politicians on both sides, can work together? Because I think a lot of I shouldn't give my personal opinion on this, but Americans do feel that Washington is truly divided. Would you agree?
Well, I think America's divided. Washington's a reflection of America. We each represent 435 of us. We each represent 1/435th of the country, okay? And we reflect the values of our districts, the hopes and dreams, the concerns of our district. And so when you say Washington's divided, America's divided. Everybody can see this, that it's like there's 2 planets right now in America, with 2 different sets of views and facts. We've been introduced to, this new term, alternative facts. So Congress just reflects that. So it's not that Washington's divided, it's the country that's divided. And we have a president who has been at the forefront of causing this division. And I think what a lot of people yearn for is for this chaos to stop, and for us to once again be the united states of America to work together, because that's always best for us when we work together. We have different ideas on the best way to do things, right? There's no problem with that. The founding fathers wanted a vigorous debate in Washington, D.C. So if the debate is the best way to do something, that's worth having. And then after that debate, there's a vote. And once that vote is taken, people need to get around that. You know, people need to rally around those things. People need to go back home and explain, you know, we didn't get everything that we wanted to do in this piece of legislation, but we got a lot of what we think is important. And it's something maybe we can improve on in the future, depending on what the makeup of the Congress looks like. That's the way it's supposed to work. So, you know, if America was unified in certain things and said, you know, we want this. A good example, Americans got unified around pre-existing conditions. The Republicans found that out in the midterm election when they got killed. 60 some of them lost their seats. Guess what? You can't find a single Republican that's not for pre-existing conditions now, because it was made pretty clear in the country, whether you were a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or didn't even vote, that you thought that was an important issue. So now we're all in agreement on pre-existing conditions. We're fighting about a bunch of other stuff, but nobody's fighting about that again. I think we reflect our districts, and those that don't reflect their districts aren't in Congress very long. Somebody else takes their place. So yes, the country is clearly divided, which has caused Washington to clearly be divided. And hopefully this election will clear up some of the division. That's what I think all of us would like to see. I think we'd like to see an election where people speak clearly. I think that happens when we get the most people we can to vote. Democracy doesn't work when only 10 or 20% of the people participate. You know, democracy works when we all participate. And so I think that's why our party has tried to champion making it as easy as possible for people to vote, while we watch Republicans trying to make it as tough as possible for people to vote. It isn't Democrats going to the Supreme Court trying to say, let's invalidate these ballots that come in legally. I mean, imagine in Pennsylvania that you voted by mail before November 3rd, and for some reason the post office doesn't get your ballot to the County Elections Bureau till November 4th or 5th. Now that's a valid vote. And yet we have people going to court as we speak, asking the Supreme Court to say, you can't count that vote. That's not democracy. That's voter suppression. And that's being done by one party, and it's not mine. So these are facts. And we know because these cases are in front of the court as we speak. And any day now, the Supreme Court's going to make a ruling on that. We wanted to count our ballots, not announce the vote, but process mail-in ballots 3 days early. Our Republican state legislature said no. Now, what would that have meant? It would have meant that on election night, we could find out what the results were, because they could start processing the mail-in ballots, not release the results till after 8 o'clock when the polls close. But because our Republican legislature, and just coincidentally, legislatures in Michigan and Wisconsin, you know, said, you guys can't count your ballots. In Florida and North Carolina, they can, but not in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The result of that is going to be on election night here in Pennsylvania, which may be the state that determines who the next president of the United States is. We're not going to be able to say what the election result is on election night. And if it takes a couple more days after that, because each county counts its own ballots and has its own machines and its own processes, people are going to start to question, well, you know, on election night, this person was ahead. Now, all of a sudden, this other person's ahead, simply because our state legislature intentionally wanted to create chaos and said, no, you can't process your ballots early like a bunch of other states are doing. So we're going to start counting ballots at 7 a.m., which is when we're allowed to start processing ballots. They have to be taken out of the security envelope, unfolded, stacked, and be ready to put into these high-speed counting machines. And we'll have, Allegheny County did a pretty good job in the primary, by the way. We were one of the few counties that actually had our act together and had a lot of machines and technicians on site to fix any problems with the machines. And we pretty much knew, I was in a competitive primary, and I pretty much knew where I stood on election night. We didn't have 100% in, but we had like 80, close to 80, 90% of the vote in. And if you get that much of the vote in, we'll be able to know where it sits in Pennsylvania. But unfortunately, I think we're one of the states that won't know what the results are in our state till a little bit later, maybe a day or two after the election.
So, as you mentioned with your concerns with this election, so do you believe, regardless who the winner is, we are going to have a fair and balanced election, and whoever the people decide to vote in to the White House, it was legitimately, excuse me, be the next president?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. I believe that this idea that somehow mail-in voting is rife with fraud has no basis in reality. There has been multiple states that have been doing vote by mail for years with no problems, and Republican states as well as Democratic states. So this hasn't been a practice that's unique to one state. Colorado, Oregon, Florida. I mean, where the president votes, they have mail-in voting, right? And this is what he's saying is fraudulent. It isn't. We know it isn't. And we know that it can be done. Now, are there glitches in the system the first time states are doing things? I mean, in Pennsylvania, 28,000 voters got the wrong ballot. Now, every ballot has the presidential race on it. The reason it was the wrong ballot is it was down ballot. Maybe the state representative or state senator wasn't the right one because they got the wrong ballot. That was a glitch by the vendor, but it was discovered. People were immediately contacted. I have 4 grown children. One of my sons was in that 28,000. He got a phone call saying, hey, the ballot you got was not a good ballot, and you're going to be getting a new one. We're mailing it on the 19th of this month, and it's going to have an orange strip on the envelope. So when you see that ballot come with the orange line on it, you'll know that's the replacement ballot. You mail that one in. And 2 days later, after the 19th, he got his on the 21st. That envelope arrived with the orange strip on it. He filled it out and he put it in the mail. So it was a glitch, but it was caught and corrected. And the way the system works, once a ballot's recorded by the scanning machine, if another one comes in, I mean, they're coded from the same person, it's rejected. So yeah, we're going to have a fair election. There is going to be virtually no fraud. Are there going to be glitches? Are machines going to jam up and they've got to get a machine unjammed before they can keep processing votes and it delays the tallies? I'm sure some of that's probably going to happen on election night. But without question, we're going to have a legitimate result. And I sort of hope we have the vote is such that it's a very clear result too. A big victory by either side would make it pretty clear that that's the will of the people. And that would be refreshing to a lot of us to hear Americans speak clearly on what their preference is in this presidential race. And so we'll see on November 3rd where that's going. We're 6 days away, so we're counting the days. And I think a lot of us, and I'm sure a lot of Americans are ready for this to be over too, and have their television sets return to normal. In terms of the commercials they've had to watch.
See, yeah. All right, so one final question for you, Mr.
Sure.
Poe. So regardless if President Trump is reelected or if it's Vice President Biden, how will you plan to work with whoever is elected, regardless if it's President Trump or Vice President Biden?
Well, I don't think much changes. Obviously, a Biden administration would be pushing the type of legislation that I think we need to do in the country. I think that under a Biden administration, you'll see a giant infrastructure bill front and center and done early. And I'm not just talking roads and bridges. I'm talking about broadband infrastructure, the grid. This would be very good for the country and put a lot of people back to work and good for the economy. So, I also think that we'd be able to start to work to repair that parts of the healthcare bill that either get struck down by the Supreme Court and to make improvements to it and to put a public option, I think would be important. So obviously in a Biden administration, I think we'd be working on a lot of things that I think are important to the country. If it's a Trump administration, we're going to continue to work as we've worked in the last 3.5 years, where we can find consensus to work together with our Republican colleagues and get things done. So to me, I've worked with 2 Republican presidents and 2 Democratic presidents. But the way we do the work is it doesn't change. It's just a matter of, you know, when you're in charge, when your party is the majority, you get to set the agenda. When your party's in the minority, you get to react to the agenda. And that's primarily the difference. But there's good ideas on both sides of the aisles, and there's been many bills that my Republican colleagues have approached me and say, you know, do you want to sign on to my bill? And I've signed on to them, and some of them have passed and some of them haven't. But I have no problem working with Republicans.
All right, so Mr. Doyle, I want to thank you so much for your time, and also best of luck with your election coming up.
Great. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody votes, regardless of who you're going to vote for. Get out there and vote. Our democracy works best when we all participate.
Absolutely. Congressman Doyle, so we are going to send it back to the studio.